Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to do two subjects born outside the United States tonight. The first born in Japan, and the second, our feature, born in Czechoslovakia. We're going to start out tonight with Shinobu Hashimoto, who died recently at the age of 100, a screenwriter for two of Japan's and indeed the world's greatest films, Rashomon and the Seven Samurai. He worked with the acclaimed Japanese director Akira Kurosawa, and there's probably no screenwriter who has two credits more legendary than those two. Here's Matthew Bannister of the BBC4 Last Word on Shinobu Hashimoto.
Shinobu Hashimoto was the screenwriter who created two of Japanese cinema's greatest classics. Working with the acclaimed director Akira Kurosawa, Mr. Hashimoto wrote Rashomon and the Seven Samurai. But as the film critic Larushka Ivanzadeh explains, he almost stumbled into screenwriting by accident.
He was born in sort of rural poverty, had nothing to do with the film industry at all, enlisted as a soldier during World War II, so he contracted TB while he was on military service, and he ended up in a sanatorium for like 3 or 4 years, so quite serious. And while he was there, someone just happened sort of waft a film magazine under his nose, and he became fascinated not just by film but specifically the art of screenwriting for some reason, and so he just started writing a script from there.
And what was the first successful script that he wrote?
Well, the first successful script that he wrote was Rashomon, which is quite a
it's like from 0 to 70.
It really is. I know. Go from having a bit of tinkering. He used to write on the train after being discharged from the sanatorium. He worked as an accountant in a munitions factory, so he'd sort of be scribbling on the train and scribbled this draft for Rashomon, which has become one of the landmarks of cinema.
And tell us why it's one of the landmarks of cinema.
Well, it's a film that's told from multiple perspectives. That's its sort of big selling point, as it were. And the thing, it's become known as the Rashomon effect. And Rashomon's even in the OED now. It sort of defines a story. It's been told by multiple viewpoints. And by doing that, it's sort of Kurosawa, who's the director, and Hashimoto, the writer, co-writer, are playing with this idea of the subjective nature of truth and human relations. And it sort of challenges that view of what you're seeing is the truth in a way that cinema hadn't done before.
And so how did the two of them come together? How did Kurosawa and Hashimoto come together?
The accounts of their meeting are full of discrepancies, almost in a Rashomon-type way, very appropriately. So they met at Kurosawa's house, and Hashimoto says that he recalls in his memoir, he said, "Mr. Kurosawa appeared right away. He was astoundingly tall. I especially remember his graceful, deeply chiselled features and the red sweater he wore. I was 31, and since he was 8 years older than me, he would have only been 39. And according to him, they talked for a few minutes. He was completely overwhelmed. But apparently Kurosawa brought the script, and just in this few minutes, he was basically like, yes, this is amazing, we're going to do it." Kurosawa himself says that they talked for hours, and he was the one who actually suggested the multiple viewpoint platform going on. So both of them take credit for this revolutionary thing. I think it's fair to say that they never really were close friends, despite collaborating for 20 years. I think Kurosawa remained this quite distant, tall, forbidding figure to Hashimoto.
And was Kurosawa quite difficult with him? Because I think Kurosawa brought in another writer as well, didn't he? And used to have a sort of competitive process between the two writers.
What happened was that the way Kurosawa liked to work, it's quite actually a system that's used by American screenwriters on TV shows today, had this kind of collegiate of writers. But what he'd do, Kurosawa, is get each writer to draft his own version of the same scene, and then the final screenplay would be sort of blending all these different versions together. And I think Hashimoto was a great purist in terms of screenplay writing, so he felt that these collaborative screenplays didn't necessarily work out. And at the end of his life, I think he had this sort of regret that by working in this collaborative fashion, he didn't develop his own strong voice that was robust enough.
We have to talk about another legendary collaboration, which is The Seven Samurai. What was it about that film that made it so influential?
What made it different in terms of the genre was it was a much more realistic sort of samurai film. So the producer of the film researched how real samurai lived, and he found that many of the Ronin were left sort of so impoverished that they had to live hand to mouth, and they took on jobs for food. And while there were these wild bandits who were ravaging the countryside at that time, peasant villages would hire these Ronin as protectors, and that forms the basis of the plot of Seven Samurai, which is a story of farmers who hire a band of master swordsmen to kind of rout the bandits who are persecuting their village. it was kind of sniffed at a bit by the Japanese avant-garde filmmakers at the time, who were all doing sort of much more experimental things. I think it was sort of seen as a bit Western, actually, and a bit too realistic. But of course, it was massively taken on in Hollywood, and of course remade as The Magnificent Seven in 1960 by John Sturges, and then of course remade again in 2016. It's just spawned so many imitators. I think any time that you see a sort of gang getting together, usually with an all-star cast of actors who are going to right some wrongs and sort of put their egos aside in order to, join together against a common foe, then we think of the Seven Samurai.
What did Mr. Hashimoto feel about it kind of having this influence, about it going beyond Japan?
Well, he remained a very Japanese filmmaker and very much a purist filmmaker, though he did look beyond Japan. He was quite a peculiar man, and he had very strong likes and dislikes. For him, a screenplay, he sort of said once, was like a symphony, and it sort of existed on the paper. He almost was like, if I've read the screenplay, I don't need to see a film. He was like, that is enough for me. And he once said of Steven Spielberg's film, he said he saw Jaws, and after that, he refused to see any more of Spielberg's films, not because he didn't like them, but because he considered that such a masterpiece, it could never be topped. So there's no point in seeing any of his films. From his point of view, a screenplay was either, a masterwork, or a waste of time.
Well, we're going to move on, and by way of introduction of our feature tonight, there's this.
From 1959 to 1980, number 21, Stan Mikita.
One of my favorite athletes and one of the greatest hockey players to ever play the game, Stan Mikita, died recently at the age of 78. The great number 21 was the center for the Chicago Blackhawks for 22 seasons. He's one of Chicago's most beloved athletes, and he still holds the Blackhawk records for games played, assists, and points scored. I believe he's the only player to win the Lady Byng, the Hart, and the Art Ross trophies in consecutive seasons. And along with Bobby Hull, who he played with, is the most beloved Blackhawk in Chicago history, and on top of that, a wonderfully nice person. I saw him play when I was a little boy, and I met him a couple of times when I was older, and I have an autographed curved stick of his, and we'll talk about the curved stick in a couple of minutes. Here is Sportsnet on the great number 21, Stan Mikita.
Stan was one of our ambassadors, and he would come and visit us once in a while in the coaching office, and had some really good ideas about the game, and he saw things kind of differently than we were looking at it. It was great just talking to him and thinking about how he approached it and how he saw it, and some of the memories, how we used to play. And you run anybody that played against Stan Mikita, they got a story or two about what a competitor he was.
For years early in his career, he was one of the nastiest players in the NHL. A miserable son of a gun on the ice is how one former coach described him. And then, just like that, he was one of the most gentlemanly players in the game. As transformations go, it was unmatched and remarkable.
His daughter Meg was 5 years old, and he just led the league in penalties the year before. And she went to her first or second or third game. And after the game, she said, "Daddy, how come you always get to sit by yourself?" He's in the penalty box. He said that changed him. The very next year, he won the Lady Byng Trophy.
Now here's a chance, a shot. Oh, by Stan Mikita. Stan Mikita was the outstanding player on the ice, no question in my mind. There's no doubt he's one of the great hockey players, particularly around the net. Over the line.
A terrific offensive player with great stick handling skills, one of the best face-off men of his time, Mikita was a star with the Chicago Blackhawks for 22 seasons.
Even in practice, you couldn't get the puck off him. He was so good, and he won the scoring championship a few times. He won everything. He was a true superstar.
Mikita was born in communist Czechoslovakia, but was spirited away to Canada when he was just 8 years old, raised by an aunt and uncle. Nicknamed Stosh because of his heritage, he had tough times as a kid, being new to the country, unable to speak the language. But over time, he began to fit in and excelled at hockey. He was signed by the Blackhawks and was a standout for 3 seasons with their junior affiliate, the St. Catharines Teepees, leading the OHA with 97 points in his final season.
Stan, when you first came up to the Blackhawks, it was a rather good story, your first game with the Blackhawks, and I don't think we've told it.
No, it's going back a few years ago. I was playing with the St. Catharines Teepees, as they were known then, and Harry Watson was their coach. He called up one night just as I was having dinner, and he said, "What are you doing tonight, Stan? I want to go to Chicago and play a game." Next thing you know, I'm in Chicago, and nobody there to meet me. I don't know which way to turn. I don't even know which way the loop is or stadium or anything. So I was waiting around the coffee shop and finally Rudy Pilla showed up and led me by the hand like a little lost sheep.
In his second season in Chicago, he helped lead the Blackhawks to a Stanley Cup victory in 1961. It was their first since 1938 and their last for many years to follow.
Tell me, boy, what do you put in that hockey stick of yours to blast them like that?
Bullets, man.
You pulled the trigger on that one, Stan.
Yeah, I got butt pretty flush on my stick that time, Ward, and felt real good.
Despite playing with a wonky back that would dog him for the rest of his career, Mikita helped to lead the Blackhawks back to the Cup final in 1971, where they suffered a gut-wrenching loss in 7 games to the Montreal Canadiens. Mikita was one of the first players to wear a helmet, donning one after taking a shot to the head in 1968 and suffering a concussion and severed ear. He helped design the distinct bowl-style helmet he wore until retiring in 1980. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1983 with teammate Bobby Hull, who together made the curved stick popular and a scoring weapon.
He was a competitor. It was always a challenge to play against him because you had to play your best. Otherwise, he was going to make you look foolish.
The puck is out of the stick of Mikita, and Stan is in, and Stan scores! Sensational move on the part of Mikita.
Stan Mikita will always be remembered as one of the greatest Blackhawks, whichever way he wanted to play the game.
Pound for pound, likely one of the greatest that ever played the game. Slippery with the puck. He made people look like outdoor backhouses. The way he could handle the biscuit. Came to play all the time. Was very confident in the way he played.
Stan was such a great player. He was an enjoyable guy to be around. Yeah, he really was.
The first star, Stan Mikita.
Well, as I said before, I have an autographed curved Stan Mikita stick, and he's generally considered by most people, except for possibly the Rangers' Andy Bathgate, as the inventor of the curved stick, which revolutionized hockey. And here he talks about how that came about.
My invention started, like all great inventions do, by accident. It happened that my stick got caught in the doorway of where the players come in and out of the bench, and somebody pushed me forward even more, and the stick cracked. It did not break, but it cracked. So as I pulled it out and I saw the L shape in the stick, I got a little upset because now I had to go all the way downstairs to get another stick, and I didn't really want to do that. So I saw a puck laying there, and I slammed it against the boards in anger, and there was a different sound that I heard, the rebound coming off the boards. I shot a couple more with a wrist shot, and that turned out to be the same thing. That it was different, and then finally the stick cracked. So I kept it in the back of my head. And I think it was that day or the next day after the shower, you're waiting around to see what guys are going to do. And I said, let me see if I can bend one of those sticks into that particular area. And it took a while to get it through my head that you have to kind of make the wood warmer or make it like a spaghetti. So it was almost cooking hockey sticks, but not quite. And the way it came out is what I was looking for. Now, it took a lot of practice to finally get the guts to use it in the game. And I think about a month later is when I finally started to use it. And, of course, Bobby looked at it. He said, make me one of those in the left, which I did, made it in the left-hand shot. And I guess the rest is history.
Bobby, of course, is Bobby Hull, he of the 100-mile-an-hour slap shot. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps, also a Stan Mikita fan. Stan and Bobby both have statues outside the United Center on Madison Street, and we're going to close tonight in honor of Stan Mikita with the Blackhawks theme song.
I spent so many years proudly wearing the Indian head sweater. To the great fans of Chicago, I want to say thank you very much.
No, Stan. It's us who should be thanking you for all those years of great memories. There'll never be another like you.
Here come the Hawks, the mighty Blackhawks. Take the attack, yeah, and we'll back you, Blackhawks. You're flying high now, so let's wrap it up. Let's go, you Hawks, move on.